but this becomes the hub of primary care for the community with permanent full-time healthcare professionals serving their patients who are attached in a permanent way. That's our commitment to you.
We know that we have a lack of physicians in the area, and we do have a lack of even nurse practitioners, and we can only do so much in the run of a day.
Near the mud line, the piles are in very poor condition. Didn't expect it. And these need immediate structural repairs, so this is something that needs to be done, in our opinion, this year.
Welcome to This Week Uncut. We take a look at the top stories of the week from CHCO-TV and the Courier. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon. We begin this week in Eastern Charlotte with the announcement of the Fundy Health Center and $1.5 million for a collaborative care clinic.
This is exciting. The last time we were at the launch of a collaborative care clinic, it was in St. Stephen. So we're keeping it Charlotte County, but you were there on Tuesday. I was here at the studio with Florence. So tell us a little bit about what the announcement was like. It looked like there was a lot of people actually that came out for the announcement.
Well, it's a very tiny lobby and everybody was standing sort of in the entrance, so I would not have wanted to be a patient who was coming for an appointment. But yeah, so the Premier was there, Premier Susan Holt, Minister John Dornan, the President and CEO of Horizon Health Network, who sort of operates these clinics, was there for the announcement. She announced $1.5 million for the physical expansion of the Fundy Health Center, but also to start onboarding new nurse practitioners and physicians and social workers, all of those allied health professionals that are part of these collaborative care clinic models.
And for people at home, I know most New Brunswickers are probably already quite familiar with this rollout of collaborative care clinics across the province. The whole government has promised 30 in the first term. And so in their 4 years of government to open, and we're at number 12, I guess this is for Eastern Charlotte. Wow, okay.
Yeah, it's the 12th clinic in a series of clinics that they've started to announce over the last, 18, 19 months. St. Stephen was the first one they've promised Charlotte County, and Black's Harbor was the second clinic they promised in 2026. So it also happens to be the first clinic they've announced this year. But it sort of was, ripe for the taking. This is a facility that already exists, and some of these clinics they're not new clinics, they're clinics that have existed, that are receiving either additional funding for renovations or additional funding for more staff or what have you. So this was, a really prime location for them. There is a facility there, there's, services available there, and people who have been working at that clinic for decades.
And to break it down for people at home who still might need some clarification on exactly what a collaborative care clinic is. Now again, this is investment by the whole government that they hope down the road has significant payoffs in terms of decreasing waits in emergency rooms, lining everyone up in the province, hopefully eventually with access to a family doctor. It's a lot of investment right now, but it also means hiring different staff that you don't necessarily have one doctor that sees your file. Can you elaborate a bit on exactly what it means?
Yeah, so a collaborative care clinic is the response to the number of New Brunswickers that are not attached to a primary care provider. They've either lost their family doctor because they've left the province, or they've died, or what have you. So they call them orphan patients, essentially. And there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of them who are unattached at the moment. And so these collaborative care clinics were a response to that, and they were previously started by the Higgs Progressive Conservative government, and they've continued that model with the Holt Liberals. And so what it means is physicians are coming together, nurse practitioners, registered nurses, social workers, all of the health professionals that you would expect are going to come together, and they're going to be able to attach patients to those people. And you might go one day and see one doctor, and you might go 2 weeks later for a follow-up appointment, and it'll be the nurse practitioner. But they have access to your information. It's all in a centralized location. It's all digitized, which is a very important thing that the health department has identified and Horizon Health Network has identified as important. You have to have digital records. And so this sort of eases the strain on the health workers, but provides also, which is the other component of collaborative care clinics, more timely access for patients. So the goal is that once everyone is attached, which is a big goal, they will be able to see their doctor within, or their healthcare, their primary care provider within 5 days of seeking an appointment.
Okay, because I know that was an issue that we've talked about even on this show, or even if you have a family doctor, sometimes just getting that appointment itself when you're waiting for that one person, be it a vacation that they're coming back from, or just it's flu season, you never know. This could get away from that wait list for even a person who is attached to a family doctor.
That's right. And when Dr. Dornan spoke, and you're going to hear from him in just a few minutes here, he talked about the fact that this is the first clinic with a plan to take the remaining 1,138 patients off the wait list.
So that 1,138 patients, that is in what area exactly?
Eastern Charlotte.
That's all of Eastern Charlotte.
That's right. So they currently have an access clinic, and I would have talked about an access clinic when I spoke about St. Stephen, who also has an access clinic. And essentially that's like if you call, you can get an appointment and sort of go in for non-urgent medical appointments to divert people away from the emergency department so that emergency departments can deal with what they're supposed to be dealing with, which is emergencies. They have a plan to take those 1,138 patients off the list, and so that means anyone who is unattached in Eastern Charlotte will be attached. I don't know the exact timeline. I know recruitment is already underway. I know the renovations, according to the Premier, are going to take 18 to 24 months, but they're not going to wait for that to happen. They're going to start they've already started the recruitment process, and so once the pieces fall into place, people will start getting those calls and they will start being attached to a primary care provider.
Okay, so a similar circumstance which we saw in St. Stephen, where they were building the clinic even though they didn't have the location. In this case, they have the location, but it's a renovation that's going to take place. Do we have an idea what the renovations will be, what it's going to add to the space that maybe wasn't there before?
It's an extra wing. Okay. So it's just like more space, more beds, more space, that sort of thing. And it will allow, doctors to see patients in singular rooms. They're not going to be like three, you'll see some footage of beds that are all lined up together. Patients can be seen individually, that sort of thing. So it is a bit of a space thing. And again, it'll take about 1 to 2 years to sort of see that to fruition. In St. Stephen, I did ask the Premier about St. Stephen because I know everyone is waiting with bated breath about the situation. The renovations are ongoing. I sort of didn't get a super concrete answer. She did say she promised before the snow melts. So
this is St. Stephen.
That's right. She's sort of running out of time on that location. But right now, the collaborative care clinic in St. Stephen's on the 3rd floor of the Charlotte County Hospital. It cannot onboard any more physicians or healthcare professionals or patients because there's not enough space. So they're at a standstill. I mean, February marks 1 year of it being open. And so they're sort of waiting for the renovations to be complete and for that process to move them over to King Street.
Okay, and that'll be when we can really take a look at data and see how it changes things.
Take a listen to Premier Susan Holt and Health Minister Dr. John Dornan responding to questions from journalists on the collaborative care clinic in Blacks Harbour.
Our 12th collaborative care clinic funded by the provincial government with expanded staffing, with new patients getting attached to a permanent primary care home. It certainly won't be the last. We have many more planned for 2026.
I have to imagine it's not an easy decision to decide, who gets to be number 12 because there's a lot of communities that probably want to be number 12. How do you pick this one?
We promised the people of this community back during the election that they would be a priority for collaborative care. I remember making the announcement with Mayor John Craig over not too far from here, and so we deliver on our promises. That was a part of it. But then we also had a team here that demonstrated an interest and an openness to moving to a fully collaborative model, an ability to attract and take on more nurse practitioners and support, and a space that, with a bit of investment, can serve the entire community. So more than 1,100 people coming off the wait list to add to the 4,000 patients that are already attached here means that everyone in Eastern Charlotte is going to be able to call Fundy their primary care home. That's meaningful, and that's what New Brunswickers are asking from us.
Can I just ask, so it's $1.5 million for physical renovations, but also for hiring additional staff. Can you walk me through the timeline for construction, sort of what you're expecting, and then at what point would these new staff be onboarded to the Fundy Health Center?
Well, the timelines are concurrent. So as Margaret mentioned, the recruitment has already started. And when we find that next nurse practitioner, they're going to get added to Kate's team, whether the renovations are done or not. I think she described an 18 to 24 month window for the renovations to be done. More details might be either in your or in Susan's hands. But as soon as we find more healthcare professionals, we're bringing them on board. And it might be a bit of a squeeze, but in the meantime, we're creating the space and renovating so that patients will be well served by a strong team here at the Fundy Health Center.
It's not a sequence. We're not waiting to the renovations before we start hiring new people. We want to onboard people, roster people sooner than later. And so we're hopeful that Margaret and her team and Kate and her team will be able to find new nurse practitioners sooner than later, as soon as we can find them, and we'll put them to work, and we'll work around them in terms of the renovations.
I believe it is going to be an expansion to the space, so there will be an additional wing that will be created, or a partial wing at least, to accommodate new rooms, as well as likely some renovation within.
I know today is about Blacks Harbor, but you know what I'm going to ask. What is the update on St. Andrews? I know when I go into the council chamber, I sort of see the renovations happening. So what's the status of St. Andrews?
St. Andrews has been moving ahead. I know we haven't come there for an announcement like this one, but that is coming. As you can imagine, the calendars are busy, and we don't want to take up time serving patients to do an announcement, but there's been great progress. Leadership from Julie and the team there to bring on a diverse group, adding new patients with the capacity that they're building. So we're going to be there soon, certainly in 2026.
And the status of St. Stephen on King Street?
Oh, well, now that we have the new space getting renovated, the renovations are... Well, I think I committed to that clinic serving patients before the snow melted, so I don't know if that's today with the sun shining, but we're tracking that closely to make sure that they can get into that space and get new patients added as quickly as possible.
Just to follow up on Nathalie's question, of the previous 11 announced clinics, how many of them are currently in the new operation, so to speak, if that makes sense?
Oh, that's a good question, because many of them were at different stages. Some of them in construction mode, as we see with St. Stephen, and others were in recruitment mode and adding new professionals. And so we're looking forward to doing a bit of a report back as we hit the 1-year anniversary on each of these 11 clinics to say how it's going, who's been added, how many patients have been attached, and what's left to do, because we're moving full steam ahead. In some cases, we've added more professionals than we imagined. In other cases, we've had some recruitment challenges. So we will keep you updated as we hit those anniversaries.
There was also someone from Eastern Charlotte that people will all recognize, Kate Burkholder, a nurse practitioner at the facility. She was at the announcement as well. What were her thoughts on everything that happened that day?
Well, she was certainly excited by the announcement. Kate Burkholder is someone that in the room, everyone sort of instantaneously recognized. She has been a nurse practitioner for 23 years. She is one of New Brunswick's first nurse practitioners, and I believe she said during her speech that she is the first to be hired by Horizon Health Network, and she has spent her career, for the most part, dedicated to Eastern Charlotte and the people of Eastern Charlotte. And so she has, worked with the doctor there, Dr. Mohammed, and another nurse practitioner as well. And she told us that this is good news for the community, because like we saw in St. Stephen, when I talked to Dr. Y.L. Saber, he said, it's stressful to need to turn people away. And she talked a little bit about, getting calls from other places of people saying, please take me. Can you take me? Can you see me? And she'd have to say, no, there's a process. You have to follow it. And so she emphasized that's going to alleviate a lot of pressure for them. And she talked about the fact that the collaborative care model should have been something that we were doing years ago. She actually, I think she said, we should have been doing it 20 years ago. Because it does facilitate meaningful continuation of care for patients. It's not just, hit and run appointments. It's sort of, continuity of care and robust care that I think she thinks New Brunswickers deserve.
And I think of it on these terms too. We've seen this happen in Charlotte County. I'm thinking specifically St. Stephen, where when doctors retire, there's no plan for the aftermath of that. And when you're at a collaborative care clinic, there's the possibility of, that long-term planning when, maybe 5 years down the road. We've seen the panic in this community is what I mean. And many of us, I wonder how many years till my doctor retires, but she seems to want to keep on going. So love you, Dr. Pinder, for that. But I wonder, and where that will leave me. So hopefully going towards this model, we won't have to worry too much about that. But the other thing is too, when you think of it, I know that we've looked at the deficit this week as well, which is a big deal. But when you factor in that going to the emergency room is one of the most expensive things you can do in the Medicare systems when it's for something that a family doctor could treat or a nurse practitioner. So this takes that, maybe down the road we will see data that way that shows us a decrease in spending. That's going to be a long time to tell those circumstances, but it'll be interesting to watch that as well.
Well, and to take your example, Dr. Pinder might want to retire, but she feels like she can't because she has patients who rely on her. And we have, as you said, seen examples of doctors who've retired or passed away who leave their patients sort of without a doctor, without their records, because we have developed a system in New Brunswick that operates in silo, right? Doctors are operating in singular practices. And so there's nowhere for patients to turn after they've, something has happened to them or they decide that they want to retire. And there is room for that in this province, and the health minister has said there will always be physicians who want to practice independently, and that's perfectly okay. But there also needs to be sort of, a space for the collaborative care model that sort of encompasses, all of the pieces and can provide, not a stopgap, but sort of a continuation of care, right? That continuity of care. You will hear in just a second, Dr. Dornan actually answer one of the questions I asked Kate Burkholder, which was about her mental health, which is what she talked about when she said, I have to turn people away.
Right.
And he said, you'll hear him talk about burnout, which is one of the reasons he had identified that the collaborative care, continuing the collaborative care model in New Brunswick was very important. Take a listen.
I think it's going to be wonderful because there are so many people that come through Access who are from other areas. Like we have people that come here from St. John, Fredericton, Moncton, Sussex, because they can't get in there. They call through our Access line and they're lucky enough to get through. And so, we treat people from other areas, but to be able to focus more on having them within our own community, I think that's going to be wonderful. And to have that newer nurse practitioner to come in and help us out as well.
Does this alleviate some of the pressures that you've been feeling for folks who are desperate to have primary care?
For sure, exactly, because we know that we have a lack of physicians in the area, and we do have a lack of even nurse practitioners, and we can only do so much in the run of a day. So we were fortunate last year to get a new graduate to come on full time, and so that's been wonderful. And she just got the okay to start rostering patients as well as doing Access, and that's what we hope with our new nurse practitioner coming in, we'll be able to do the same. So looking really forward to that.
In your 23 years, obviously we're seeing this shift towards collaborative care models. Just in your experience in the healthcare field, is this the right time to go this way? And if so, how beneficial is going towards this type of care model?
It should have been there 23 years ago. But no, this is a great model. It's always been a great model, and now that we're really refining it, I think is even more so. Like, it's wonderful. I know when I started here 23 years ago, it was me by myself and a physician that had semi-retired, and you know who I mean probably. And actually it was by fax machine. And the only wonderful thing was that I had lots of nursing experience to back me up. I was halfway through my career then. So, a lot of nurse practitioners they don't have that experience to back them up. So now having a good collaborative team is wonderful. We come and go out of each other's room to bounce things off of, and Dr. Muhammad is really great to be able to do the same, and all of our other, like the dietitian, the pharmacist that come once a week, like they're all great resources for us.
What does it do for your mental health, I guess, because you can spread out your duties and your opportunities, you might get more work-life balance. I guess how does that improve your mental health?
I think to improve your mental health, you have to sort of do it yourself. Like, you have to make that a goal, because if not, you can get very drawn in knowing that there's 4,000 or 1,000 people still waiting to, get a provider, and you're always constantly. I'm constantly having calls from other areas saying, will you take me on? No, I can't. I'm sorry. This is the process. This is the way we do it. So, yeah, I think some of that has to come from within. Yeah.
What are the physical changes that will happen in this space that will make a difference to your work day to day?
Well, we won't have to share rooms. Like, we might have to, you won't have a bathroom lineup. No, those are crazy things. I'm just kidding. But no, just being able to have individual spaces and know that there's going to be a flow to that. We've already sort of started at working on that flow and looking at clarity of roles and who can do what. And so I think it's going to really improve the whole thing. Like, it's just going to be wonderful to get more staff and more space.
People were burning out.
Yeah.
Nurse practitioners were leaving. Physicians were leaving. And if you go to town hall meetings, they would tell us that. And we spend half our day on paperwork, half our day figuring out our overhead, and we don't get to bed at night. We don't get to spend time with our families, and we're going to leave. And you don't pay us well either, by the way. So we've negotiated better contracts with our nurses and nurse practitioners and our physicians. So now they say to us, this is a good place to work. You respect us. And so can you tell that to your friends in other provinces? Can you tell that to the new graduates? Can you tell it to the nurse practitioners that are graduating from UDM and UMB? And they're listening and they're coming to work here. So we're promoting an environment where you don't burn yourself out.
That was Kate Burkholder, a nurse practitioner at the Fundy Health Center.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, I'll look at the structural assessment of Market Wharf and Market Square.
Those piles are severely compromised in the steel area, which means that they don't have the same capacity that they originally had.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. Heading over to St. Andrews, where you were at a presentation by Fundy Engineering over the Wharf assessment. So tell me a little bit about what you learned and what the presentation was like. I'm halfway through watching it, but it's quite a lot to take in. So I'm excited for you to break it down for me. I am going slowly through the presentation and having to pause it quite a bit.
First, let's start by saying I'm not an engineer, and I've watched the presentation 3 times, and I've read the report twice, and I still have points of confusion for sure, but I think this is sort of the next logical step for the council. Fundy Engineering was contracted by the councils after the original project in its original scope came in over tender. So the council rejected that tender because they couldn't afford to move forward. But there was also community members who were speaking out against the design, aesthetically, that expansion of Market Square that we kept hearing about, and then, that rock infill, I guess, the armor stone that they thought would be, dangerous, but also inaccessible. People were talking about, St. Andrews by the sea, right? People want to walk onto the ocean floor. And so for the public's record, the report is available online. Please go read it. Please watch the presentation. You need to be able to understand, with as much knowledge as you can, what these individuals are saying and what this means for the structure of the wharf and how the council moves forward.
Okay, so I should point out for anyone who might be new to the community that, like you said, they went to tender in the summer for what originally had been a wharf plan, but because tender was way over, They weren't able to go ahead with it, but also you found a different deadline than what we were originally working with for the Wharf. So originally, the pressure for getting the Wharf done was that we assumed the deadline for completion of this project. So the Wharf is a complicated story. But again, for anyone new to town, we thought the deadline was spring 2026. You, through investigative reporting, she is wonderful, found that the real deadline is 2027. Okay, so that also changes things too. So there was a little bit of a desire to figure out what to do urgently until we figured out that the date actually gave some more flexibility. So that's another layer to the whole situation. But this assessment, the purpose of this assessment was for what exactly?
Well, the last assessment was done in 2018.
Okay.
A lot of time has passed. I believe 2 hurricanes have made their way through this region. And you know, I think Kurt Gumichel said it during the tendering meeting. If there wasn't an opportunity to pump the brakes on this because of that deadline, they would have wanted to move forward with this because there is a sense of urgency around the Wharf, right? Mm-hmm. This is probably the most critical piece of infrastructure that exists in the town of St. Andrews. It is where people come, they want to see it, they want to walk on it. I experienced firsthand this summer, tourists going down and seeing lobster fishermen bring lobster in onto the wharf. But this there were some things that we found that were surprising. I will say there was some surprises there, but there's also information in there that we already knew. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that it was ever in doubt that the wharf needed to be fixed, but I think this gives the council the concrete, pardon the pun, evidence that they need to make a meaningful decision about how they move forward. It's no longer, well, we think it might be damaged. It is damaged, and it's damaged in ways that are very detrimental to the operation of the town, to the stability of the wharf, and to the safety of the public. So we have a full picture and a second opinion, right? They first contracted with CBCL, they've now contracted with Fundy Engineering, and now we have a more up-to-date, a wholesome picture of the wharf.
Okay.
So what I think was surprising, I think both to myself and the engineer, Gordon Mulland, who made the presentation, was that the head of the wharf is actually the part of the wharf that needs the most immediate attention. So the head of the wharf is the front end.
So the furthest out.
That's right. That square piece of property where the building, where the wharfinger works, the bathrooms, and where you can park along the edge of the wharf.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because you've done a lot of the focus on the wharf reporting. Was that even part of the consideration last summer to be fixed at all? I thought that part was staying the same.
Right. So the original scope of the project was to fix the wharf approach, right. Which is that Market Square is over here, Day Adventure is over here, and you sort of drive onto the wharf, that inlet piece, but also the seawalls on either side. That sort of first 40 or 50 meters was what needed to be fixed, and that they would look down the wharf in future years because it at that time they presumed was okay. It's not okay. So they have identified that there are 19 of the H piles that have significant loss of steel. Okay. We recommend that these piles be assigned the highest priority and be repaired as soon as possible. So this year, they want it done this year. And then in addition, 51 of the H piles in the splash zone at the high water level need to be protected from corrosion. And so you'd have to understand as well that if you've either been to Market Wharf or you've been on Market Wharf, that there is a tremendous amount of weight on the head of the wharf. People park there. Fishermen drive their trucks down full of gear. And so they have that part of the wharf would be a safety risk in terms of all of that weight that sort of sits on the end of the wharf. So those need to be addressed right away.
Okay.
The other part, which we were not surprised by, is that the inner approach is in need of work. So it's the other main area of concern. So the inner approach is 55 years old and at the end of its 50-year life cycle. So it's not at the end, it's actually over its life cycle. And we sort of understand that the timbers have collapsed in some areas and show signs of rot over a significant portion of the structure. You know, the slab, if you've walked on the wharf, you'll notice that there are asphalt patching. That's because the concrete is deteriorating due to an alkali aggregate chemical reaction. So the deck also needs to be replaced. So that's sort of where we're at with the inner approach. And so the inner approach deck structure has significant localized deficiencies in its general condition. Its general condition is poor or very poor. Okay. So it is recommending that they limit traffic like 2 cars and half-ton trucks.
Okay.
Boom trucks, other heavy load activities should not be permitted as they would exceed the existing 9,000 kilogram load limit. So it will be a small portion. There is a section also of the outer approach, so that's the long path that you will take to get to the head of the wharf that also sort of needs bracing. They talked about cross ties and bracing were in poor condition with some evidence of cracked and missing timbers. Wooden piles are in good condition except for 21 out of 140 piles that need partial grout-filled fiberglass jackets. The outer approach road and the head of the wharf are in very good condition with maintenance as required, are good for many years. The outer approach road requires timber pile jackets and eventual replacement of all the cross bracing and whalers. So it sort of seems like there isn't any part of the wharf that doesn't need work. It's just how they're going to approach that. Mm-hmm. Now, I was reading from sections directly in the report, and I'm going to let you listen to Gordon and his coworker, John McKilvey, about what they said and sort of how they explained that to the council. But there is no part of the wharf currently that remains untouched by some sort of structural damage. Right. And so there is no more option. It's not, we'd like to do this, it's you have to do this. And so we're going to have to get our heads around that idea. We're going to have to get our heads around the 3 options, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. And we're going to have to get our head around how we fit it within the budget.
I was going to say, when I said when the deadline 2027, that's the deadline for funding. That doesn't have to do with the deadlines. We know how urgent the wharf repairs are, but this at least gives us a little bit more of a better understanding of what it means.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have a budget. It's my understanding that Infrastructure Canada cannot give them any more money. I spoke to the finance minister a few weeks ago about the third quarter fiscal update. The budget is coming on March 17th, but he said they're not in a position to cover federal shortfalls. So now we have to develop a path forward. Take a listen to 2 Fundy engineers presenting to the St. Andrews Council on the structural assessment of Market Wharf and Market Square.
And this will give us a little bit of an overview that I will bring up some of the more pertinent things in our condition survey. Bit of background: the St. Andrews Wharf was built and rebuilt in stages between 1960 and 1990. And some repairs done in 2010. The 3 sections of the wharf were the head of the wharf, out where the floats are, the outer approach road, which is next working in towards the shore, and then the inner approach road section. Plus, we have 2 seawalls, one for the market area and one for the day adventure area. So I'm going to start at the head of the wharf because that's the one that's in most need of attention immediately, that and the inner approach road. So the piles support concrete vents and the reinforced concrete deck, which is in good condition. The steel H piles are driven into the harbor bottom to bedrock through, in some places, the remnant of the old wharf that was built in 1960 and was partially burnt. Near the mud line, the piles are in very poor condition. Didn't expect it. And these need immediate structural repairs. So this is something that needs to be done, in our opinion, this year. We also would recommend that the section of the wharf that is adjacent to the day adventure gangway, that is the areas of most concern. And we're recommending that we limit the traffic in that area. Like, just don't take the chance of saying, oh, only pickup trucks, because that doesn't mean somebody else can't come out with a loaded vehicle and park it in the exact same spot that we had the dive team park. But we hadn't seen the piles until we did the dive team thing. Those piles are severely compromised in the steel area, which means that they don't have the same capacity that they originally had. So we do have, and that's in the report, is what that structural pile repair would look like. Also, at the top of the piles in the splash zone, this is up above high water level or near high water level, they're in poor condition, but I think they can wait until year 2 and just use standard grout-filled fiberglass wrap jackets. So then going inward, the outer approach road is founded on wooden piles. I'm driven into the harbor bottom through some dense sand, probably stopping on the bedrock. Those are in good conditions, but they're at a stage in their life cycle where they do require some maintenance. And that would be grout-filled fiberglass jackets in the areas, not the whole pile, but in the areas that we have concern, and it varies from 1 meter in length to 3 meters in length. And that would be, again, something that would be done in year 2. The inner approach road, I forgot, there's some cross bracing that needs to be done in the outer approach road. It's in poor shape, but it's something we see doing over the next 3 to 4 years, and then reassess it at that point and see if there's additional that needs to be done. There's some that are in place and intact, and others that are just hanging in the wind. So it's it's a maintenance item, but it is probably should be considered a capital project.
Just one thing, John McKelvey, Fund Engineering. Just one thing to add to that note is there has been repairs done on the cross bracing before, but the hardware used was either low-grade galvanized or just clear steel, and that's caused a lot of the issue with erosion. Some of them are disconnected. So some of the cross bracing are actually fine, but the hardware has actually failed and then caused failure in the pile too as well. So that's just a note on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, John. Thank you. So the inner approach road is basically built out of wooden trestles that are founded on bedrock. We actually did some test bits to confirm that. So the wooden posts just sit directly on the rock. There's no footing. And it has been repaired over the years. I think 2010 was a date that was used, where new wood posts and cross members were sistered onto the existing, and additional galvanized steel gusset plates were added to keep it in decent shape. And the trestles actually are not that bad a shape, but what they hold up, the deck above, it's a composite deck of concrete sitting on timbers on edge, and there's some reinforcing in the concrete deck, but it's about as big as my little finger. It's not very big at all. And so if it starts to corrode, there's not a lot left if it is corroding, and we've seen on the edges that this has happened. And one of the areas of concern is that there's a big asphalt patch that's down to probably the reinforcing steel, and if there's water getting at it, that reinforcing steel is not in good shape. And we need to check that probably in the spring before the season starts to see if there's anything that has to be done to remediate the deck on the short term. So and one of the reasons that the deck is deteriorating is age, and it has an alkali aggregate reactivity problem. So what happens is the cementitious material in the concrete and the aggregate itself have a reaction, and that reaction produces a chemical that it occupies more volume than the original constituents. And when it occupies more volume, it causes to expand. And when it expands, it will pop aggregate out and it cause just a slow deterioration of the concrete. And there's some pictures in the report that shows that. If we get down to that detail, I can point out how that happens. It's the same sort of thing when you have a piece of steel and it rusts. The rust occupies more space than the original steel did. And if it has nowhere to go, it causes forces that cause the deck to deteriorate. This is exactly what's happening to the Mactaquac Dam. Same problem, exactly the same problem.
So just another note to add on that one too, is that's just the deterioration, the crumbling of what you see when you walk out, and which has caused I assume, the asphalt patch before. That rebar, when it rusts, again, what Gord says, it expands, but it really, when that exposure of that structural steel happens, that's where it starts being aggressive on when it's going to start deteriorating, because it basically, everybody knows, everybody owns a house here, that when water gets in, it's very aggressive and it keeps leaking in, and that's expanding, especially with our environment, especially with this environment with the freeze-thaw cycle, exposure with a lot of areas, and salt air, it just really starts deteriorating quickly. So what we see is bad, what's under it is probably just as bad, we just don't see it.
So the second main thing to do this year is what we're recommending, is to start to do the supports for the new deck. We can't put a new deck over the old trestles because, they are end of life, basically. They might have a few more years in it, but it's not cost effective. So what we're suggesting is that in between alternating trestles, we will put in the footings and the superstructure underneath the existing deck, try and get another year out of the existing deck, and then the following year before your season starts, put a new deck on and get yourself back up to something that is usable as opposed to something that is basically not that safe.
That was Gordon Malloud of Fundy Engineering speaking to the St. Andrews Council about the structural assessment.
We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll listen to Council's questions to the engineers about the Wharf assessment. Stay with us.
In the sense that the more we infilled, the lower the cost was. Whereas the approach you guys have where that outer or the inner approach really doesn't change within all three options. So it's actually the opposite this go around, where as we reduce the infill, it actually gets cheaper for us.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon. So we're going to sort of listen to council, and I sort of just listened at the council meeting, sort of taking in the information, looking at the councillors' faces, and certainly it was a lot to take in, right? This is an enormous amount of information, technical information, and I think new information for them. But I think what this does is it prepares them with the right tools, the right information to explain to the public, hey, we've chosen this option for these reasons. Mm-hmm. And they have the evidence that they need to say, this is why this is the right decision. And you'll hear some of that, I think, from Steve Neal, who talked about, the infill component of that. And so I think this is a good place. We're sort of, there was a lot of things that happened. There were people who were upset There were people who were angry because it wasn't moving forward. There were people who were upset because it could have moved forward. And so now we're past it. We have the right information in our hands, and we can sort of start to carve out a path forward.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that one of the other big concerns too, when it didn't move forward last summer, was just the idea that it's what they went to tender with was already came back millions of dollars over budget, what they anticipated. But on top of that, there was this, thought obviously that inflation will also keep increasing these costs. So now we're at a place where we're not, the average price in summer when we were looking at was 13 million. And we weren't expecting to see much over 8 million. So that was quite a significant increase. So where do we think, did they even touch on cost yet? Maybe not.
I heard a few numbers in there, 680,000 for something, and then, so I'm not sure they're there yet.
Okay.
But I do want to stress that this engineering firm has sort of placed a priority on how it is approaching the work that it wants to do, which is in phases. And I think John said it at one point. He said, the idea here is that we limit the amount of time that people don't have access to the wharf, and also, avoid disrupting tourism season, which is the largest economic driver in St. Andrews. Take a listen to some of the questions from councillors to Fundy Engineering on the structural assessment of Market Wharf and Market Square.
I made a few notes here as you were talking. Maybe I'll quickly go through those and then I'll comment on the other, or ask questions on the other thing. So the delamination on the inner approach was basically because it was asphalt on concrete, which I've never heard being done.
No, it's not the asphalt and concrete, other than that there is a big asphalt patch where the concrete had deteriorated, and because of the alkali reactivity, and it had deteriorated to the point where it was a fairly deep hole, and the patch was some asphalt, which is not uncommon to do a patch with asphalt, but it's just indicative of a potential problem that could be quite serious, and we need to look at it before we get into the public and general use and heavy use.
Well, no, I just think my experience has always been put concrete on concrete.
Yeah, concrete would be much better. Yeah,
It's makes sense. The other thing, you mentioned the pile jackets, and you were talking about doing just the hourglass sections on the piles, as opposed to doing the entire pile at once.
Because there is some sacrificial anodes that need to be kept up, but this hourglass thing was on the whole just below the sacrificial anodes, and so there has to be, it'll be part of what we do, is come up with a new design for the sacrificial anodes so that they're properly covered, and or put some mud around it, anything to keep the oxygen away from the steel so that it doesn't rust. And so the sacrificial anode design would have to be improved, and that'd be something we do as part of the structural fix.
What really stood out to me is within the three options, as opposed to what we were working with before, where the level of infill was related to the price, in the sense that the more we infilled, the lower the cost was. Whereas the approach you guys have, where that outer or the inner approach really doesn't change within all three options. So it's actually the opposite this go around, where as we reduce the infill, it actually gets cheaper for us. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. And again, the one thing I just wanted to point out, again, was with regards to the boat ramp, which I know we've talked about previously, but just so people are aware that the boat ramp in all of these options does remain.
Yep.
So that beach access will always be there. It just simply moves the boat ramp out a little bit farther than it currently is, which to me, again, is not a bad thing, because it actually makes it a little bit more usable as far as the tides go. So
Yes, so that was just a couple things that we talked about is, the aesthetics of in this infill. It's a wharf. We don't want to create it into a breakwater. That utilization of space, that helps a kind of a balance with replacing a new deck. And we just looked at the minimum of that and what needs to be done. But again, with the boat ramp, we had a good conversation last time we met about that. And it is a very valuable asset, and having something more, I don't want to say substantial, but a little bit more engineered than what's currently there is beneficial to everybody. I mean, wharf maintenance, public access. So it's just a win-win. So yeah, that's a very key point that may have potentially been overlooked, but the importance of keeping that is very vital in all these. So again, yes, whatever we do with our alignment, there's always going to be a boat ramp there.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to take a look at what the team is doing next week. Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. Looking ahead to next week, well, we're getting well underway into our municipal election coverage. So it's about to start heating up. It's going to be March.
I've stopped thinking about it, I think, mostly because I know how much work is ahead of us, I guess. And there's a lot of things that are going to be on our plate and a lot of candidates that are going to step up in the coming weeks. And I'm just excited to watch my favorite form of elections unfold, local elections.
Very exciting. I mean, I love when you get notifications from people in the community about when are you planning your meet the candidates night. So that's already started. So we will be letting you know very soon what the dates are for each community. But we have the March edition of the Courier coming out. So that's the first big thing for March. So look for that in a store near you. Yes. For free as usual, but the big March edition, it's always exciting. And we want to thank Guy Grew, who has been volunteering with the Courier for almost a year now. He approached us with the idea of, hey, you guys are doing a great job, but what if you printed it again? And we were like, oh my gosh. It was a big enough struggle just to take on the newspaper and to keep it alive. We thought, oh my goodness, printing is another thing altogether. And he said, what if I taught myself layout and you just send us content? So Guy's been doing that for almost a year now, but he's gone on to his next endeavor. He's a busy guy. So he got us off the ground with printing the Courier again. So thank you very much, Guy, from the bottom of our hearts. We didn't realize what a hit it would be. It's quite exciting when you realize resurrecting a print paper in 2020, whatever we're in, is actually something that's successful and doable.
I want to really thank the local community who has stepped up to support the Courier. In my career, I've been at a newspaper, I've been at a broadcaster, and advertising has sort of been how journalism has funded itself for a long time. And then during COVID-19, it sort of slipped down the hill and it sort of crashed a lot of newsrooms or really siphoned the funding to a lot of newsrooms. But our community, is fighting for space in the paper. They all want to be in it, and it has become a beloved part of the fabric of Charlotte County. We're so excited that you love it and that you want it to continue, and it is going to continue. I will find more hours in the day, and we're going to have a new version. It's gonna look a little bit different than what you have become sort of accustomed to, and we're excited for that. It's not gonna look super different, but it will have some changes to it, and we're gonna hit the ground running April 1st, a new version of the Courier. Thanks for joining us for another episode of This Week Uncut. We'll see you next week. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth.